message, we'll get back to you either toward the end, or if we have a time allowed permits, we'll have some breaks. And so thanks to Professor Park and Silicon Valley group here, that we were invited to give you a tutorial on cybersecurity relating to the whole digital transformation. And we have quite a few presenters. There's senior subject matter experts from Trend Micro, and this is part of our initiative for education, where we provide education for the community. And Trend Micro is a company, we've been around for almost 30, 40 years. It's a software cybersecurity company, and we have quite a bit of presence around the world. And so one key thing our CEO and executive believes, we want to empower employees to give back to the community, particularly with our knowledge on cybersecurity. And so as a company, we have been very successful for a long time for selling our product and services. But one thing, a lot of time we feel we're missing to achieve our vision of a company is to provide some sort of education to the community, because you can have the best in tools and product, but if you had a tendency to click on this phishing email, you still sort of not able to defend yourself from a cyber attack and criminals. And our initiative of education is really trying to help the community so we can achieve our company vision of making the world safe for exchanging digital information. And what we have seen there's rapid change taking place in our whole industry, and what we refer to this is Industrial 4.0, where kind of like other industrial revolutions, where there's some major changes. I think one driving factor is the smart devices out there, and taking advantage of smart devices like your appliances at home, or in the factory for automation, or smart cities. And the one key factor driving this is the cyber physical, where really you're embedding computer algorithm to the devices to make decisions or communicate with some sort of system. And I think that's a very key change. And for our smart devices, we're seeing, depends on what data you read, we're seeing like billions of devices been deployed so far. And that's going to make our life quite different. But all these benefits we're going through is we do this so-called digital transformation era, and the benefit will not be able to present itself unless we keep the whole cyberspace secure. And so I think that's the challenge, because there's a lot more opportunity for the attackers or actors to do bad things. So I think that's sort of my lead into our sessions today. And again, my name is Mitchel Chang, and I will introduce the three speakers. So we kind of put together a very good agenda, because Industrial 4.0 transformation. So we will talk about both IoT from a commercial industrial perspective, also as well from the consumer and home individual user perspective. And then we'll end up at the wrap up of the session with one of our enterprise subject matter expert, just talk about overall enterprise security and how the corporations and large enterprise are doing, defending themselves, or some of the challenges we may be facing. And so with that, so our first speaker today is going to be Jerry Liao. Jerry is one of key Trend Micro technologists, our engineering leaders globally, and he resides in San Jose, but he works across the time zone and helped Trend Micro develop some of our key both future and current consumer product. And Jerry?
Yes.
Are you ready?
Oh yes, I will be
okay,
ready right
start,
after your
Jerry.
session. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Jerry, you want me to present your slides, or can you share?
Oh, I can share definitely, but I think if we go back to your previous slide, do you want to also introduce Richard and Steven's session a little bit? Because you just briefly go through my session, yeah, in the beginning.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
Okay. Let me also present Richard, so that way Jerry can just hand off to Richard. We also have Richard Koo. He's one of our senior vice president at Trend Micro. Richard's been at Trend Micro for a long time. He's have managing both the product management and was general manager for some of our product families. And more recently, he's been focusing, helping the company to drive the whole IoT, the commercial side of IoT strategy. And he's been doing a lot of marketing and business development to working with our close partner and customers to really help drive the Industrial 4.0. So Richard, we're gonna follow Jerry's presentation, and then we'll wait for I'll introduce Steve Allison later, since that's kind of different topic. Okay, Jerry, would you like to go ahead?
Oh yes, yeah. Let me start sharing my screen first. Okay, perfect. Mitchell, can you see my slide?
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Yeah, so I think we are 5 minutes earlier around time, and we have around 30 minutes to go through the slide that I have for today. And good morning, everyone. And again, this is Jerry Liao, and I am based in, just like Mitchell mentioned, I'm based in San Jose Bay Area, and it's really great to have this opportunity to share some very valuable information and technology we have locally. And just like Mitchell introduced, and I work in the R&D engineering group. So I think for today's topic, we'll go through some more detailed technical backgrounds that hopefully that will interesting you. And for the IoT threats and solutions, that in this session, I will focus more on the connected consumer and also in a small and mid-sized business area. And later on, my colleagues, Richard and Steven, will go through the industrial IoT and enterprise IoT part more specifically. Okay, so let's go to the agenda. So the thing we want to talk about today, number one is what are the security risks of using those IoT devices at home? I think it's quite typically right now in a normal size home, we can see tens or 20s of connected devices. It's very common. And the way we go through the risks, and the first one is we'll do some security news recap to see what to say on the media, right? And the second one is we're looking to the IoT threat landscape. And inside Trend Micro, we have collect some very valuable insights that so we could see what's going on the real attack and the defense side and the trends. And those things we'll share you in this session. And for this one, we focus more on the smart home network or home network and also on the SMB. And most of the data that we present today is collected in the second half of year 2020. And other than the security risk, we'll go through what steps that you can take to minimize those risks. And I have compiled the 10 best IoT security practices that I could share with everyone. And the last part is we'll leave some time for the Q&A. Okay. So the first part is the IoT cybersecurity news recap. And wouldn't be surprised that the biggest news for this year is the pandemic. And the pandemic actually leave a lot of people that either work from home or study from home. And we know the criminals, the bad guys, they constantly change their tactics and they will adopt the latest trend to conduct their attack. So we could see one very popular trend is that they will use the remote desktop protocol to conduct the attack, or we call it RDP. And the reason for that is because just mentioned that a lot of people work from home and study from home. So you have the need to access the remote desktop or remote system that on the other location. So from the traffic point of view, it's very popular to see those protocols. And it's really difficult for IT to just block those remote desktop protocol access. So it's become very good chance for the attackers that to just utilize this channel to conduct the attack. And the way they use the attack, usually typical two ways, right? One is through the vulnerabilities on the system or device. The other way is you just brute force and try to take away the credential. And because of the weak password, a lot of people use, so it won't take a lot of time to just brute force to attack the system. And of course, the protocol is not only limited to the remote desktop protocol, the RDP. We see a lot of other protocols like the remote shell or server message block. Those popular protocols that have been used attack before. So later on, we'll go through all the details of those attacks and provide you the numbers to see how those attacks going up and down. So the number one is the brute force attack, and go through the protocols like RDP. Okay, then the second one is you might be wondering that for IoT devices, they are resource constrained, smaller devices. And why the criminals want to attack those kind of devices? One very good usage for them is make each devices become a bot. So if you have a lot of connected devices as a bot, then you can compose a botnet. And it's very difficult to have those botnets to grow to a size over hundreds of thousands or over millions of devices under a specific group of control. And once you have so many devices under control, that the way you can do with it is you can conduct a so-called distributed denial of service, or we say it's a DDoS attack. And because those IoT devices, they share the same IP address as a legitimate home user or small and mid-sized business user. So it's difficult to just put those IP into blocking list and try to block them, because in this way you block also the legitimate traffics. So for the distributed denial of service, the DDoS, what's the benefit for the criminals, right? And commonly they will use it to ransom some websites. It could be gaming industry, it could be gambling, right? It could be bank, or it could be social site or e-commerce. Every kind of sites that if they could ransom for money, they will likely conduct DDoS. And they will also possible conduct DDoS on the infrastructures, right? And we also see this kind of attack under our data. And they will also attack some internet infrastructure like DNS before. So this is a very popular tactic. the criminal would use. And from the news, you could see they take over the devices like a smart building, then take over devices like DVR, surveillance camera. Those are very popular targets in the old days. So this is the botnet and the DDoS. Then what else the criminal can use, right? And one very common way has been used and still lasting to nowadays, no matter happen to consumer or business, is a ransomware, right? To ransom for the money. The early days, like in 2017, the very popular is WannaCry. And WannaCry use the server message block exploit. And the tool actually is developed by NSA. So it's an NSA hacking tool, but being penetrated and being retrieved by the bad guys and used as a criminal tool and converted become a ransomware, WannaCry attack. And those attacks later on also quite frequently happen, attack during the government side, you could see on the news, or sometimes hospital, which is really bad because they have some very valuable and life-saving data they need to protect. And for home and small business, then we could see, because we store before a lot of data on the PC. And other than the PC, we store the data in the NAS, right? You think it's quite safe and you have a very good backup. But if those NAS devices are not safe, then the thing you back up might not be as safe as you saw. So those become also a target of criminals that they can deploy ransomware and encrypt your data and try to get money from the victims. The next one, look into the number 4 one, is the routers or VPN server. And the good, I think the part that the criminal will use a router is router and the network devices like VPN is a very good place to conduct man-in-the-middle attack. So because of location is more scarce for the normal users, right? So it's not easy for the victim to realize actually the threat he thinks that they go to is actually not the real ones. So they will hijack your traffic. They will redirect you to somewhere else, or they could push malware to your systems, no matter it's a PC or it's mobile devices that you use. And I think just past few days, one also very popular example happened in the enterprise is the SolarWinds event, right? So in this case, the vendor actually is a network IT remote management or network solution providers. So their solution actually being used as a backdoor to distribute the malwares. So the criminal actually can possibly attack a lot of high-profile targets, right? No matter it's a government or very big vendors or even cybersecurity vendors in this case. So, so this kind of network devices is very commonly a very high-value target for the criminals. So it wouldn't surprise to see this kind of news also being revealed to the public. And then the last part will go through the vulnerabilities, right? We know the attacks, they happen through 2 ways. I just talked about. The number 1 is the criminal just use brute force attack, right? Just try to guess what your password, your credential is. And the second part is go through the vulnerabilities. The software on the device, if there's a vulnerability, then it's possible can be used as a remote code execution, the RCE, or install other backdoor or Trojan. So the attackers can conduct a remote operation through those devices. And one of the popular vulnerability has been revealed in the first half of 2020. So you could see they are like a UPnP is a very popular for device to go through the network, right? And also you could see at the bottom, it has an open WRT. Open WRT is very similar to in the old days DDWRT. Those the users actually can convert the router devices to open source one, so they could have chances to play with those devices. But by doing so, actually, you are also unknownly that has opened your devices to possible attacks if your OpenWRT or other systems is not properly patched. So there are bugs that could open to the remote code execution also being revealed. And also for the Microsoft Server Message block, this one I just talked about in 2017 is was used by WannaCry as a tactic under the Eternal Blue, a very popular one, to conduct attack. And for this year, there are other vulnerability being disclosed, like in the SMB v3 version 3, so it's one or more latest one. So it's also a remote code execution. And for all the devices we see being attacked in the early days, like surveillance camera, DVR, and printers, and also NAS, those are all very common to have zero-day vulnerabilities. So those are what happened in the news. And later on, I think we'll go through the real data to see what's the threat landscape we observe in the wild. So not only the media coverage that we are going to look into some real attacks. Okay, so what are real attacks? And the first one we talk about is network probing. So I will explain a little bit on this concept. Is I think for the cyber attack, what happened virtually is very similar to what happened physically. Like in our physical world, we just think about a burglary, right? Or a home burglar. It's a very common tactic they would use is they would do a reconnaissance, right? They would try to drive around the street and your neighborhood to see which houses has possible open windows, right? Open gates to the backyard. And you do not have dog, right? You do not have a surveillance system. You do not have a camera. Then those are very good targets for them. So they will conduct this kind of activity ahead, and then they will try to do the real attack. So that's what happened in the physical world. I think in the virtual world is the same. The bad guys will do the probing. And the probing we observed, it happened actually over 10 billion times in the first half of 2020. And those are actually a TCP closed port SS attempt because those ports, they were closed. So usually the legitimate system will not try to access because it wouldn't work, right? Because no one will respond. But because in the reconnaissance, for the attacker, they just want to know what happened. They just want to see, and it's a low cost. They just send out the broadcast. So it's easier for them. And you could see the port they try to access very commonly, like 22 and 23, like that's used in the telnet or remote share, right? And also 80.443 and 8080, those are commonly used as a web. And the reason they use the web protocol is because a lot of a connected device, the administration interface is open through the web. So the web is also a very good way to get the access of those connected devices. And we could see also the port 21. 21 is used by FTP as a command port. So we just introduced a NAS, right? So file storage devices is very variable as a target of ransomware. So Telnet, web, and FTP, they are the top three groups being used, especially the port 23 that is used at Telnet. We see around half of that happen 5 million times. And those attacks, they were IoT warned and non-specific target attack. They are just not a regular port scan based on our analysis. And the second part that we'll go through is the real attack. So the first part is the reconnaissance activities. The second part is the attack. For the attack, we observe over 1.7 billion times. And the first is a brute force logging attempt. And it accounts for almost 90% of the inbound attack we have observed. And a lot of reason I just described because people work from home, study from home. So open a lot of more protocols and also direct internet access from the system. So the protocols like RDP, like SSH, like SMB, those are all very commonly used target. And the second part is other than the brute force, and their attack goes through the vulnerabilities. So the IoT worms and the bot. So we'll go through the vulnerability like remote command execution through a shell script or a GPON GPON router. GPON is a gigabit optic network routers, and we have more specific data. We'll go through and show you about those attacks. And you might be wondering that with all those numbers, they are so specific, right? So how do we get those attack information? How we know the attack, the activity from the attackers? It's not because we work with the criminals, of course, and it's because we have a global sensor network. And usually, when you want to see those activities, there are commonly two ways you can conduct. One is active scanning, like a map kind of activities, right? Then you could conduct and to scan what happened in your network devices and what are the vulnerabilities, right? And the second one is you could do a passive monitoring, which is also very popular and common on the network industry. And from here, then you could see the traffic goes through, and you could observe the intrinsic traffic with the agreement from the user. You can even block those attack attempts. So it works like IPS in this case. And in Trend, we work with global vendors. So we have quite good visibilities to see what happens in the world. And this is a map right now. Is one of the latest we have for the IoT visibility. We see from the city location, and you could see what we are helping to monitor and observe and work with customer and partners right now. Is globally distribute different continental and major big cities. So we cannot only do it through a global scale to see what happened. We can also run into a specific like city and to understand what's the threat landscape and what the attacks really looks like. So given that, we look into the first attack is the TCP close port SS attempt. And these ones that from the first half of statistic, then we could see just like I mentioned, the most popular one is a telnet, the port 23, and a lot happened also the secure share, port 22, and the web related, the 443, 80, and 8080 also account overall over 30%. And also some of that is port 21 that happened to the FTP command part. So see the real attack event happened, and this is the data collected from June 2019 to the June 2020. So you could see especially the telnet one, the port 23, that try to get access from the remote side is grows really constantly, and especially higher after March. And it's over 1 billion events that we have observed. And the other activities and also go up, and sometimes that depends on the tactics and system, the criminal use, it goes up and down. And this is the TCP close port SS attempt that we have observed. And attack number 2 is the server message block. This SMB does not stand for the small and mid-sized business. It's a server message block, a brute force attack. And SMB is very commonly used in the file server access, no matter it's a Windows system or it's a NAS system. And from our data, we observe is represent around 64% of all inbound attacks. And among those, the NAS device actually suffer 87.7% of those attacks. So really NAS is a big target to during this time frame for the attackers. So if you have another system at home or in your environment, you really need to be very careful about the devices on the settings you have or the latest patch or firmware you have applied. Okay, and for this one, the SMB goes up and down, and because it's a constant target of those criminals. And attack number 3, we are going to take a look is RDP. And this one you could see, wow, it's very obviously started from the February, right? It's going up and up and up all the way to the trend. Actually, it go up the way to the end of this year from the data we have observed. So this one is really not only just reviewing the news as a hype. It's really something happened behind the scene as an attack, especially under the network that we have observed, network and the systems that we have observed. Okay, and so we go through the brute force, right? So we attack number 4 and 5, we go through the vulnerability. So it's more regarding the routers, and this GPON routers is a gigabit optical network routers, and those vulnerability actually they were revealed around more than 1 year ago. So you could see once the vulnerability being published, right, there was some activities and start develop the proof of concept, and then the draft version, the beta version, and become a more mature tool that can be used to conduct in the wild attack. And those attacks we see happen more dramatically. It started from December. So even the vulnerability has been published for quite some time, like over a year, but later on that when the situation is mature, that the tools are mature, they will be used to conduct a real attack. And so just like the news mentioned, for those router devices, a lot of way the criminal actually convert them into the botnet. Okay, this is another very good example. Is remote command execution. The RC is a very very authentic and very common and popular way to get an access of the devices. So it's not something new. So it's been used all the time. So you could see even now this device is sometimes another device that will be used to attack. So this is another example you could see. Okay, great. So after looking to all those attack numbers, real attack numbers and tactics, what are the general trends we have observed and how vulnerable those home network we have seen? Is this is collected from our smart scanner, and this smart scanner actually is a free tool, so it can be used by everyone who is interested, and actually has been used over 1 million times in the world that to scan their network environment to see if there's any. I think it could show 2 benefits. One is show you what devices connect to your network, your router, and the second is are they vulnerable or not. And for the network that has been used to scan, we observe there are almost 30% of network actually has a vulnerability. So it's a quite big number, and we wouldn't surprise because the connected device quality, they are not really that consistent, especially for those devices not from big vendors. The second numbers we see is how many vulnerability actually vulnerable device has been fixed, and the number is 5.68% during first half of 2020. It's not really a big number, so see a lot of vulnerable device still live there. And once a vulnerability has been published by the third party, usually it takes some time for the vendor to really fix it, and then publish the update firmware for those vulnerabilities. And it takes some time for the users to the end really to apply those patches to the system. And we could see those vulnerability really has been patched. It's actually less than 5%. So it's not a really good number we could see happen and it's not really surprised because those data we observe is collected from the consumer and also small business usually they are not that tech savvy and do not have dedicated people to help them to take care of this cybersecurity part. And this is about the vulnerability. Then you will think about, well, even you have vulnerabilities, you might not be attacked, right? What's the chance that you will really got attacked other than the reconnaissance attack event that over 10 billion and over 1 billion I show you? So overall, for the system we have observed, 13% of them actually really suffer attacks from. So those are attack attempts, either from the outside or after your internal device has been compromised, then the attack will be actually conducted from the inside. So it's an inside out. And how many of the network of them actually has a device being actively compromised? And those devices are around 3% of the network that we notice. And for all the attacks, and just I explained, that it could happen from the inbound. And once your internal device will compromised, then it will reverse and become a DDoS to the outside or to the industrial devices. So it becomes outbound attack. So the inbound and outbound attack, the ratio we saw is 16:1. The trend we have observed. Okay, so for those vulnerabilities, that if we more quickly go through those systems, usually we see the number one is insecure components, and those components can be scanned during the development time or could scan during the runtime to see what's happened behind the scene. And it could have unnecessary open ports, right? And for the enterprise, a lot of time you do not have a sufficient logging mechanism help you to identify after once the system has been attacked or compromised. And the system being designed for consumer devices, you might not have adequate privacy or encryption protection. This also happens a lot in the smart devices, like recently, like Apple, right, has been constantly and upgrade their privacy protection to their consumer devices. So for of course for a lot of vendors, smaller vendors, they need to catch up on this, on the protection of their users. And of course, a patch management system, very important. Once vulnerability has been disclosed, the patch need to be developed very fast and have a very efficient mechanism to deploy those patches. And the last part is also how you manage the password, right? Because the attack not only through the vulnerability, is over 90% of the time is happens through just brute force attack your credentials. So if you have if you have backdoor, you have a hardcore password, you have a weak password, it's very fast your system will be compromised. I wouldn't be surprised. So those are very common vulnerabilities that people would want to watch for. Given that, so those are the IoT attack trends we have observed. What are the best practices that for the industry that we could offer to all the events that has happened? So for the number one, of course, be very careful in choosing the devices. Usually, if I myself, I would consider the devices from more well-known and a good policy and have better trade records, especially if the device has a cloud component, is a public cloud component. For the account access, do they provide a two-factor, multiple-factor authentication, right? Do they reveal a privacy policies? Those things is very important on choosing the devices. And for those connected devices before, like I mentioned, in the early days, it might be a surveillance camera, it might be printer, it could be NAS. And later on, the major appliances you could observe, right? They are all become a connected device or like the washer, dryer. And I think one of the most devices I observed myself is the cooktop, right? The cooktop, electric cooktop itself, I purchased, actually it provide from a well-known vendor, it provide the capability to connect to the internet. But this one scared me and I would not want to connect this device to the internet because it represents a possible fire hazard. It's very dangerous if the device got control from the remote and turn it on and if the device owner is in a vacation or something remote site, it's very dangerous under this scenario. So when you use the devices, you need to be mindful that if it's not really necessary and if it's a little bit or it presents some dangerous, then you wouldn't want to do that unless the feature is really important to you. The second one is review all the device and app permissions and being requested by the connected device. Right? This one doing better and better, like I mentioned right now on your mobile device, all the app installed on your mobile device, what those app has access, the Apple in the iOS device will let you know. So it's also something, a development right now that is a good development for the users that let them know that what has been collected. And once you install a device, you need to change all the default password and settings, right? And disable all the unused functions and connections that you do not want. And the reason for that is a lot of brute force attack in a while. And you need to map and monitor all the devices connect to your router. And right now, no matter is for commercial or consumer, there are devices outside can help you to do that, to see the activity right now happen in your devices. So you have a better visibility, then you have a better cybersecurity, because visibility usually is the beginning of what the protection start with. Okay, then let's go to number 5 and number 7. And after you have a device hookup properly connected and apply the right settings, and of course you need to download the latest updates for those devices and app you use. And be mindful from the place you download those app and those devices. And even the best part, of course, from the official and legitimate sources. But even sometimes, like in the SolarWinds case, right? Even in the legitimate source, they might be a backdoor. So you still want to monitor those activities in your environment. And it's also quite popular right now, even for the home. We have the automated service like IFTTT, those kind of things. So for the automated device, and you need to check your configurations. This is part of the configuration management, right? You need to check your automation settings, credentials, and if it has been modified somehow through from the outside, from the external, you need to check and monitor it also regularly. Okay, and the last part is go through the number 8 to number 10. Is if you can do it, you should use a network segmentation. Even home router right now, then a lot of them have this capability. So for the guest, you can have a guest network, right? For specific home IoT devices, you have a more closed IoT devices network, separate from your PC and a laptop and also smart home devices. A benefit is at least they won't cross attack each other, because like what I just described happened in the middle. Even those devices using become a bot, right, or become a target of ransom. Sometimes, and when you use your PC, then you conduct e-commerce. Then if there is a man in the middle, then your credential in this way will be stolen. So not only the device will be attacked, you would propagate through your day-to-day working system. So if you don't have a proper network segmentation, then there will become a problem. And not only the virtual settings, like physical connections, wireless, like Bluetooth or Zigbee, Z-Wave, those things, if we are not in use in your environment, then you should switch them off. And the last part is all those monitoring sometimes will be better done through automation. So if you have a multi-layered protection solution, like you have IPS in the gateway, you could conduct DPI, or in the endpoint, you have some cybersecurity solutions. Those things will also help that no matter from the visibility point of view or from the real protection point of view, they will provide some very helpful protections to those environments. So those are the 10 best practice I have for everyone. for the year 2020, and pretty much it summarizes the presentation I have for today. So to the end, I think I will leave it to Mitchel to see if there is any question.
Yeah, so for the attendees, if you have any questions, please submit to Q&A panel in Zoom, or just type in the chat. We'll try to respond. And so far, Jerry, there's no question. I have one kind of thing, for general consumers right now, because as we know, as you described, IoT vulnerability and threats are on a very fast pace of increase as we see. And any advice to the consumer that's out there? Because right now, if we look at a consumer segment, they some of these tasks are maybe quite complicated, right? If somebody install a refrigerator or smart TV at home, what's some of the steps? Should they wait for like a new product or tools that can help with security? Because to access to a lot of these information, even default settings in a smart devices may not be as easy for an everyday consumer. Do you anticipate any solution that's going to come up in the near term?
Yes, I think Mitchel. I think for average consumer or small business owners, IT, I think can start with the 10 best practice I just described. Oh. And the beginning of that, a lot of times, of course, visibility. So you will want to have the visibility, especially at the gateway to see what happened. And right now, on the market, you could see there are some even consumer grade devices that provide you this kind of capability you could choose. So you just Google it or you just go to Amazon. You could see there are some consumer grade devices that will provide you the network activity visibility and what actually installed in your environment. And like just mentioned, for Trend, we also have a free tool, absolutely free, and you can try it. Then it's IoT Smart Scanner. Then it will tell you what the device is in your network and tell you what the vulnerabilities of those devices. And if you have a weak password, then it will discover and it will let you know that and advise you to change your password. And so for those things that you really want to minimize, because I think in the cybersecurity industry that we try not to become the low-hanging fruit, right? It become the easy attack targets. You have a lot of open ports, right? Those networks, they are not segmented, and you did not have proper configurations and the patch. Those things that are quite obvious. So the smaller surface that you have can be used to attack by the criminals, the better for you. So if you don't have time to do that, then I think it would be best to just maybe purchase one of those devices and help you at least minimize the attack surfaces through IPS function in the gateway.
Okay, thanks. And I believe at Trend Micro, we also still have a product we sell through Amazon, right?
Oh, yes, we do, yeah.
We detect such a, and okay, great. Thank you, Jerry. Again, you have any questions, feel free to put in the Q&A or chat board, and we will come back toward the end of the tutorial. So the next session is going to be presented by Richard Koo. So Jerry kind of give you a pretty in-depth view of IoT more for consumer and home users and small business perspective, these devices. And as we know, these devices the number of devices out there are growing exponentially, as well as number of threats and vulnerability, as we see in Jerry's presentation. So more critical part as we take into Industry 4.0 is going to be the infrastructure, the smart cities, the factories, the autonomous vehicle, and these type of things. And so we're glad to have Richard Koo here. He can give you a perspective on IoT, industrial IoT, and how that's coming along. And again, thanks, Jerry and Richard. Are you ready?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Let me share my slide. All right.
Okay, take it away, Richard. Thanks.
Mitchell, thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jerry.
Can you see my slide?
We can see your slide, but I think in the yeah, not in the presentation mode. We can see your slides in the regular PowerPoint mode.
Let me put into a slides.
Yeah, it's Richard fixing the slides for those who just joined us. So we have the tutorial here. The first two sessions we're focusing on IoT, both industrial and consumer. And the last second half of the session is going to be hosted by Steve Allison. He's going to go through just enterprise security for corporations and large organizations. Okay, looks like Richard dropped out by accident.
All right, can you hear now? See now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks, Mitchell, and thanks everyone for taking the time on this morning in Saturday. I know it's pretty challenging for all of us at this time due to the COVID, but I hope everyone are staying safe. And so today, I'm going to cover a couple of topics, right? And this, as Mitchell mentioned, is going to be very much focused on the industrial side of the Internet of Things. I think Jerry talked about, IoT from a consumer perspective, and I will focus mostly on the industrial side. So,
Richard, sorry for interrupt.
Yes.
You might want to share your video.
Or my video.
Yeah.
It's okay for now. I think I'm just going to use, because I have a kind of low bandwidth there, so sometimes it might affect.
Okay,
yes.
No problem. Yes.
So
yeah,
I've got a couple of topics. We'll talk about some of the basic definition of what is IoT and IIoT and OT and stuff like that, and then I will cover some of the threat landscape, specifically on the industrial side, and then I will also share some basically industry business and technical challenge as I go out there and talk to many of my customers and partners, and what are the challenges they are having in terms of how to best implement cybersecurity or cyber strategy in an industrial space. And then we'll look at some risk model. Right? I have a simple risk model to kind of show people on how from as organization transition from industry 1.0 to the 4.0. What are the risks and challenges they're going to be seeing in their environment, and then I'll come back with some high-level best practice and then a Q&A. Okay. So next. So before I go there, I do want to kind of talk about the definition first, right? Because IoT mean different things to different people, right? And so what I want to do, kind of lay out some of the early definition, make sure we are on the same page. So what you just hear from Jerry is the IoT, or the Internet of Things, and this typically referred to the internetworking of physical devices, right? And all the item that embedded with electronic software, sensor, and network connectivity, which enable this object to collect and exchange data, right? And this type of device are typically smart device, as Jerry mentioned, and I kind of refer to this as the many other Fitbits like smart watch, smart camera, right? Maybe your smart refrigerator, smart printer, and smart car and stuff like that, right? And so these are what I typically call the type of internet or IoT, right? And then we also have the IIoT definition, or we call it the industrial Internet of Things. And this referred to the use of technology in an industrial control environment, right? And this typically including technology like machine learning, AI, big data, and the communication protocol like machine to machine, right? And these are really technology used to really allow for to basically help organization to become more efficient in a more consistent and more reliable in the way that they use this system in the environment, and that's how we kind of refer to it, industrial Internet of Things. And then the other definition I want everyone to understand is OT, right? This is stand for operational technology, and this is traditionally associated with the manufacturing and industrial environment. So it's important to kind of make sure that this and this includes stuff like industrial control, maybe your system like a supervised control system, data acquisition system like SCADA, and so forth. Right? So make sure everyone understand this. And I will also talk quite a bit about IT/OT conversion, right? As organization transform, right, from industry 1.0 to 4.0, right? There is a convergence of the IT side with the operational technologies on the engineering side, and that integration are now starting to happen, right? So I want to make sure that people understand that this, IT/OT convergence is also clear. All right, and so another, it's an important definition to think about is cyber incident, right? Cyber incident, this is kind of like more of a de facto IT definition, right? And so, what typical ITs are defined as connected to the internet, anything that connected to the internet, running Windows, and data is maliciously being manipulated or stolen, right? And this is more all about privacy, right? Now, NIST is also defined this as an electronic communication between systems that affect confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So you can see that, on the IT side, it's all about privacy, but on the, industrial side, or the, that part of the world is really more referred to basically is the availability and the safety, of the these devices, right? One other thing I want everyone to understand also is this thing called the Purdue reference model, right? And this is kind of the reference architecture as a foundation, and this is developed by the International Society of Automation. And this is something that it's important for everyone to understand. I will talk about that more. And this is not the OSI model, right? I think as many of you know about the OSI model. And so the basic architecture, right, of an ICS network, right? And I kind of refer to this to kind of the Purdue reference model. And you can see the way that it's laid out, right, in this architecture is basically, you have basically level 4 and 5, and that's typically your enterprise side, right? The IT networks or the enterprise zone. And then on the bottom, right, what you call the OT networks, the OT zone, right? And this is the industrial zone and then cell area zone. In that portion of the architecture, you see it's laid out into level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And this will become more clear as you start to further understand on how organization basically design and architect their industrial networks, and how the different sensors and actuators are talking to the PLCs or the HMI machine, right? So and on the right side, that's kind of typically the speed or the level on how fast the communication is actually happening across each level, right? And so you can see, from the very top, it could be, how the data go from the level 0 all the way up to it could be, from millisecond all the way up to days and hours, right, in the industrial side. So I want to make sure everyone understand that. And this is a basic control system, right, and how it lay out and how basically actuator and devices in the field, right, talking to, right, each other. For example, here you can see from left to right, you have basically at the process level, you have basically device and sensor that are actually talking to like a remote, PLC or RTU controller, and from there through some kind of communication protocol like Ethernet, serial, or wireless. And then of course you're talking, and then that will be communicate to some type of master SCADA system or server, or what people call an HMI machine. And then from there, the data and information can be, collect into some kind of like ERP or some kind of data warehouse, right? And so this is kind of very high level on how basically control system basic, on how they talk to each other. So just for everyone's information. Now, let's shift gear a little bit, all right? And so I would speak a little bit about how and what type of threat that we are seeing. And this, I'm not going to walk through every single bullet point, but I just want everyone to understand that industrial attack, in industrial space is real, right? And you can see these are some of the data we have been collecting over the last couple of decades, basically capturing the different type of cyber attacks in the industrial side, right? And really starting in 2010, and this is the first time we really kind of see this Stuxnet, right, worm. And this is really more of an attack on the Iranian nuclear power plant, right, which is causing about 20 to 25% of the centrifuge kind of damage, in that kind of form. And then back even around the 2017 or 2015, 2016, right, you have this another attack, what people call the industrial or the black energy attack, and this also affect a Ukrainian power plant, a power grid in the Ukraine, and basically causing hundreds and thousands of us, people homes to lose their electric, city, for a couple of days. So this is just one example, and that as well. And then just some of the very recent one, like in the last, a couple of years, you see a lot of ransomware attacks. They're affecting many of manufacturer, right, as well as the different verticals as well. But one of very notable here is also a big, manufacturer over in Taiwan that also was affected by the ransomware, where it's causing more than 100 or 10,000 machine was kind of down, and more than 250 million in terms of cost on downtime and and stuff like that. So the attack in industrial space is real, right? Just that you don't see a lot of issue or a lot of things have been communicated in the news, but it is real in the industrial side. So this is just some high level information for everyone to understand. And then of course, from an industrial controls perspective, right, you can see we have seen more than 1,200 plus incidents up to date in terms of real attacks, right, happening in some of this industry, everything from power to energy, right, to manufacture to oil and gas across different verticals, right? And as I mentioned, the impact can range in very significant, like a discharge of equipment damage, right, to major electrical outage, right? And at least, what we have seen is that many of these incidents have caused, at least up to more than 1,500 deaths, but it's just not really, people don't speak about it. And the indirect impact in terms of the economic is more than 70 billion in terms of a direct impact into some of this business, right? Very few of this ICS specific type of, I would say cybersecurity technology training and the policies are available. And that's a big challenge. And what we're also seeing is that many of these industrial control devices are very much directly connected to the internet, right? And many of these are gateway, and so it's very easy for the attacker actually to gain access and gain control of some of this very critical infrastructure, right? And so that's additional information for everyone to know. So here are some of the recent incidents, right, that really affect kind of some of the industrial control networks and across on the enterprise side. You can see Jerry mentioned a little bit on the recent CISA alert, right, AA 20-3528, right? This is kind of like emergency directive 21-01, and which mentioned about the SolarWinds Orion platform, which was basically got compromised through some type of upgrade. And so we don't know what the extent of this damage and how many actually critical infrastructural environment have been attacked or have been compromised. I think more data will be coming. I think that's what we're hearing quite a bit. And then back in July, right, there's also this CISA's alert, right, AA 20-205A, right? And this is also basically seeing many hacking on some, programming logic controller, right, that is connected to the internet, right? And then, there's another, order or executive order 13920, which is really kind of like some of the transformer that was actually shipping from other countries, especially from China. They were kind of implanted with some kind of back door that allow potentially in the future for other people to kind of be able to gain control of some of this transformer, and do all the damage, right? So this is another very recent incident, but you just don't hear a lot about it. And of course, you have many malware, like ransomware attacks, that happen across the industrial side, right? So again, these are real stuff. It's important for everyone to understand. All right, I'll shift gear a little bit and talk about some of my experience and some knowledge I have as I talking to many of these customers, and I'll speak a little bit about some of the business and technical challenge that they're having, right? And so as we go out there, we talk to many of these organization, especially for vertical like manufacturers to oil and gas, power, nuclear, and water and stuff like that, right? What we have seen is that they have a lot of business challenge, right? And one of the most notable thing was a lack of domain knowledge and expertise, right, when it comes to dealing with cybersecurity and cyber strategy on the OT side, right, on the industrial control side, right? We have basically today you got a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge on the IT side, but on the OT we don't have a lot of expertise. And also even the countermeasure itself, right? The security control and how to be implemented is very lacking as well. And as I mentioned, as IT and OT kind of converge together, right? You do have a lot of challenge in terms of roles and responsibility, right? Traditionally, you have the IT, people who are actually really managing the IT security and the IT strategy on the IT side. But what happened is when you have this convergence happen is that the OT networks and on the engineering side or the plant side or the manufacturer side, right? You don't have expertise on IT security, right? And so today you have that very unclear roles and responsibility as to who need to manage, cybersecurity strategy across both IT and OT. Right? So that something is a lot of challenge to many organizations. And then of course on the traditional IT side, we don't have a lot of legacy environment, right? Legacy system, but on the OT networks, right? Some of the systems have been around for decades, right? 10, 20, 30 years, right? And due to that, right, there is very little technology or security control or countermeasure that can really help prevent some kind of cyber attacks, right? And many of this system was never designed, right, for security, right? It's more designed for efficiency and safety and reliability, but security was more of a low priority, right? And so this is also a big challenge with some of this legacy system. And then many times as you talk to some of this organization and what they really mentioned was sometimes the management level tend to kind of set a higher priority on the economic or the productivity, right, over the other cybersecurity, right? And so cybersecurity become more of a secondary, I think priority, and this start to become big issue now across many of these big organizations, so many of these vertical like oil and gas and power, right? And of course, ROI is a very challenging for many, I would say security folks to prove, right? Because until you are being compromised in the downtime, right, it's difficult to prove, the ROI for many of these security, folks. And of course, regulation and leadership support are also a big challenge for many, company, right? As you more and more organization, are connected to the internet or convergent, right? You're gonna start to see more and more regulation from agency, right? And many organizations today already, industry today already have some kind of regulation like NERC-CIF, especially on the power side, or even from many of the government agencies, right? And this have to be kind of part of the standard for cybersecurity frameworks for them. And of course, leadership support is also very important. And sometimes it's very challenging for some of these organizations to get the leadership support, right? So these are some of the interesting business challenges that the people are having. In the technical side, there are quite a few things I just also want to mention, right? As organizations transform and you're moving from industry 1.0 to 4.0, right? And new connectivities are happening. You're going to have, larger internet connection, and you have wider connectivities of more devices. You're going to see a lot of shadow OT, right? On the IT side, we talk about shadow IT, but also on the OT network, on the industrial side, we also see a lot of unknown devices connected into the network without knowing it, and that can be a big challenge for many organizations, right? And of course, as I mentioned, a lack of security by design. What I mean by that is that traditionally, system and software and application built on the OT side or was never built with security in mind, right? And that is something, a big challenge on the technical side, right? It's always, hey, get something out there and then we'll worry about security later. And that's a big challenge. Many of this protocol, right, in some of this industrial, environment are, proprietary protocols or insecure protocol. As well as the application of OS have been around for years and haven't been patched or updated, and that's a big challenge. We also have a lot of vulnerabilities that and patch are not available, right? And been around for some of these PLCs or maybe DCS system or HMI machine, right, have been around for years without any patches, and a lot of them are very vulnerable, right? And then of course some of the traditional malware today, like APT, ransomware, and some of the state-sponsored attack can very easily compromise many of this system and is affecting some of this environment. And then we talk about all the different legacy systems. So what I'm really saying here is that everybody know about cybersecurity, but the challenge is really know how to apply correctly and make sure it can be applied properly into the industrial control side. All right, we'll shift gear a little bit and talk about some of the risks into ICS environment or ICS network and OT environment. And so what I have here is basically kind of give you a high level overview of the evolution on the industry risk, right? As you can see here on the left side, you got from low to high, right? And automation and connectivities, low to high, and then on the bottom, business and operational risk from low to high, and environmental complexity. So as organization, transform, and then moving from industry 1.0, 2, 3, and 4, right? You see basically an increase in automation, and you have more, increase in connectivities, and the complexity of the network become more complex, right? You basically started to have more, vectors and more attack vector for the adversary to compromise. And so you can see also then that also increase in the number of attacks and the number of sophistication, right? And that's why as you move from 1.0 to 4.0, right, you do have an increase in risk. And that's why it's so critical to make sure that cybersecurity is part of the overall transformation, is part of your strategy as you move forward. And how do you reduce this? Very simple, right? If you basically, as you transform your organization and you have connectivity between the IT, OT networks, and you're adopting cloud technologies, or let's say virtual technology and stuff like that, you want to make sure that you have better visibility, right? So increase that visibilities, and you also want to increase in terms of prevention controls or detection controls, at some level of say organization or structure in a way that you can actually increase response, right? And also there should be a lot of collaboration, right, between the IT, OT organization, so that by having that knowledge and education and collaboration together, and with all this capability, you can really try be able to reduce some of the risk in the industrial side. All right, so what are some of the best practice, right? And what I typically tell folks is that there are really kind of 4 big pillars, or looking at starting the big picture, right? And the 3 pillars for me when it comes to looking at cybersecurity for the industrial control side is the people, the process, technology, the culture, right? People is also very important, because having a trained staff and people who organization aware of cybersecurity or the threat, that can be very, very helpful right? Within the organization. Also, you want to make sure the organization, have the right skill set and the qualification, right, to deal with the incident, right? And you have competent resource to address some of these concerns. So the people component is a very important pieces, right? Process, right? You need to make sure that as an organization, right, you be able to have some level of governance, policy, some framework, some type of managed system or some best practice, in place, so that when something happens, right, there is a process for you to go and deal with such an issue instead of challenge coming through. So that's important. And the technology itself, as I mentioned, many of this technology on the IT side does not necessarily going to work on the OT network or an industrial control networks, right? So any technology coming and being applied, it had to be tested, verify, and validate to make sure that it can be deployed. Because sometimes what I see many times is people deploy IT product onto the industrial control network, and sometimes it causes more problem than actually helping it. So it's important to understand that. And you do, even though you have the technology, right? As I mentioned, you still need that competent people, right? And the support process and the overall plan, to make sure that this technology are being deployed properly. And last but not least is the culture, right? Creating a cybersecurity culture within the organization is crucial to reduce cyber risk, right? And if you educate, let's say, your receptionist not to click on, let's say, an email that could be a phishing, email, right? And that can also reduce that risk, right? So having that kind of culture, right, and starting from the top down to all level of the organization is important, right? So at least these are the 4 pillars that I think every organization need to look at in terms of a cybersecurity strategy. Here are some good standards, right, that have been around in the industry across many verticals, from power to manufacturing, right, to oil and gas, and and even your traditional IT environment. And these are standards have been around for many years, and you can actually download, you can access some of this information, and you can read through it, and you'll be able to understand how each of these frameworks are addressing a particular vertical in terms of what is the cyber strategy and what is the cyber security control that need to apply across your industry. So for example here, the ISO 27000, NERC, right, and also IEC 61162-460, right, and then 62351. Those are very good if you are in the power and energy industry, right? But when it comes to industrial automation, IEC 62443, right, it's also a very good standard and good framework as well. So these are some of the framework and some industry standard. It's already out there, it's already available, and anyone can actually download and get access to it and be able to better understand how to secure this type of environment. All right, so what is my recommendation, right, in terms of cybersecurity in the industrial control networks or OT environment, right? Here's a couple things that I typically recommend. Is that first, you need to have visibility into all the assets, right, and in your OT networks and the protocol, and understand what kind of control command and what type of threat that potential could come in. If you have something come in, you want to make sure you have that visibility across all your environment. So it's that important. Some level of real-time protection and enforcement, right, to prevent security breach, right? And also you need to make sure that this technology implement have to have minimum overhead, right? Because in the industrial space, especially if system like PLCs or HMI machine or some of this system, they are they've been around for years and decades, right? And they have minimum memory and limited resource. So you need to make sure the right securities are actually can be applied. And then you need to be both secure the ICS OT network to keep the operation running and reliable and make sure it's safe, right? Because it's all about reliability and safety, right? And keep the operation running 7/24, right? So is important. Some level of comprehensive protection, right, across kind of the network level, like, and to the endpoint or sensors or device. And then if, for many organizations start to transform and utilize cloud and virtualization, right, those systems also need to be secure, right? So it's need a kind of very comprehensive security solution across all the different levels that I mentioned. And then of course, this solution that anyone bring into the market or into the networks need to be able to adapt and fit into the existing infrastructure, right? And the operation process of the organization, right? You cannot just bring in technology and want to rip and replace, because that's not always going to work. And typically most of the time it won't work, because some of the systems have been around for decades, and it's probably going to be used again for the next couple of decades. So it's important to make sure that happen. And then of course, some level of central management, right, to allow you to basically perform some level of distribution of maybe policies or update, or and be able to have some level of multi-tier deployment capabilities, and can be integrated into your existing, let's say, SOC like SIM or SOAR platform, so that you can have complete visibility across both the IT networks as well as the industrial control networks. So that's something you need to think about. And so here is a very high level architecture that I created on how to implement a defense in depth solution on industrial control networks. As you can see here, what I already designed was on the right side is your traditional IT network, right? And you can endpoint, server, messaging, email, gateway, and then into the cloud. On the left side, right, this is kind of reference, that Purdue reference model I mentioned earlier, right? Level 0, level 1, 2, and 3, and then in the cloud. And so you can see across each of those levels, from level 0, you have the sensor, the device, and actuator, right? Typically at level 0. And then you got the control network, which is where you have all your PLC, your DCS system, right? And then the next level is your supervisory networks. This is where your human machine interface, right? Like a SCADA computer and stuff like that, where they're typically running Windows. You need to make in that environment. And then you got the operational or the control level, which is, this is where all the basically planning and operation things are happening, right? And these are typically your newest Windows environment or your virtualization environment, and kind of similar to your kind of enterprise network. And then last but not least, you got what I call it, the connected cloud or connected world, where you have many organizations now start to connect, right, from their device and the sensor through the kind of gateway, and then from there they connect directly to the clouds, right, bypassing all these different levels. And so that is another level you need to secure. So you want to be able to basically have capability that you can secure each of this level, right, and then in the cloud, right? And so there's several ways that you can implement, right? Endpoint security solution, you got cloud virtualization security solution, right? And you got technology like high-end network IPS and a firewall product, and some sandboxing technology and capability you can actually implement. And so some of this logo that I put here is kind of like some sample on how you can implement cybersecurity across each of this layer. And one other one is, we do also see a lot of trends in device or contractor, right, come in and perform upgrade or maintenance on some of these, industrial control networks, or especially PLC. And this can also be a big, basically a vector for the adversary to compromise the OT networks, by basically writing on some of this compromised laptop, and they can, once you basically connect to the PLC or the OT networks, you now be able to compromise and through that transient or the contracted machine. So this is just a high level recommendation for everyone. So again, that was kind of my last slide. So just some key takeaway. As I mentioned, cyber attack on the ICS or industrial control networks, OT environment are real, right? And we are seeing this over and over again, and can have very significant impact into the business. And cybersecurity, as I mentioned, right, is the kind of the foundation for your digital transformation. So as you transform from industry 1.0 to 4.0, you need to make sure that those capabilities or technology is part of that foundation and that part of that planning. And Trend Micro also partner with many organizations and many folks out there, and we are equipped to help and company transform their business as well. So yeah, so I also have a white paper that I co-published with another cybersecurity industrial cybersecurity. You can actually download here. It's free for everyone. You can download and kind of read about it. We talk a lot about some of the basic stuff, but also education on how to best provide cyber strategies, cyber control on the industrial control side. So everyone, thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any question you might have. Mitchell, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat board. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot it to us. Richard, I have one sort of departing question for you. Is we see that there's this IT/OT convergence, and I can just imagine with especially with the recent threats, we have the state actors try to penetrate the United States infrastructure. How much is the threats coming in from the lateral sort of, people will get into the IT side through some sort of phishing or through the like a third-party vendor of an organization, and laterally try to shut down like infrastructure, like your factory or smart devices within the OT side. Do you see that's happening a lot, or that's still in a growing phase?
Yeah, I think in many, depending on the verticals that companies are at, like, for example, if you are on the power and energy side, right, some of the traditional environments are still kind of very much isolated. So, you don't see a lot of those, but for, smart manufacturers or healthcare organization and, organizations start to have this convergence between IT, OT, right? We actually see quite a few of those, for example, I had one example where you have this black energy attack in Ukraine. That's exactly what happened, right? The adversary actually compromised the IT networks, right, and some of the system, and they be able to basically, kind of, I would say, sniff around on the OT network and be able to basically gain access to some, credential, and they be able to perform a lot of movement over the OT networks, and they be able to compromise, and then they start to compromise the OT network. So we have seen quite a few of those, right, in the last, I would say, couple of years, and it's going to happen more and more, right, as this convergence happens. So we are seeing quite a bit of many of the, even the ransomware, right, actually coming through kind of phishing attacks, phishing email on the IT side, and basically somebody click on that attachment, and then once the user click on that, it will drop files, and it will just lay there dormant, or they will start to perform assessment and gain credential, and they'll be able to go to OT network. So we are seeing a lot of those actually happening, especially organizations that start to converge and between IT, OT.
Okay. Do you see that actually slow down on some of the organizations? They're afraid such scenario that slow down their adoption of IIoT?
I think the folks that on the critical infrastructure like power, oil, and gas, and and stuff like that, they are very cautious now, right? And so it will be very slow for them to really, I would say, adopt some level of security, or let's try to have this conversion happen. But in terms of technology adoption, right, even though they are kind of isolated, we do see more and more organizations are transformed, right? It just, they're going to try to keep their network completely isolated, right? And so so yes, we are seeing organizations actually adopting technology even for and when they do that, right, they are going to also adding cybersecurity as well. They are transforming their business. So even though they're separate and try to keep the IT and OT networks separately, they are adopting technology, for sure, because there's no way around it, right? Because if you want to become more efficient and more, I would say, fast and to improve your operational and more efficiency, you're gonna have to adopt additional new technology. So we are seeing organizations transforming, but again based on the vertical, right? Some vertical is moving faster than the other, and those are like the critical infrastructure is much more slower. But sector or vertical like manufacture, healthcare, right? Like a pharmaceutical stuff like that, they are actually moving pretty quickly in terms of technology adoption on the IIoT side, because they want to improve the efficiency, the reliability, and the safety of their devices. So they are adopting quickly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, certainly the benefit outweighs right now the risk that's pushing this fast progression. Okay, thank you very much, Richard. So so I will go ahead and introduce the next speaker, and that's Stephen Allison. Steve came to join Trend Micro in the recent years, and that he has a lot of wealth experience in enterprise security. So he will be talking, we're going to shift gears now, instead of talking about IoT, we're going to be going over just enterprise threat management and some of the technology piece that we have experienced and things we can share with you, audience. Before Steve, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Well, we had a glitch this morning, so I wasn't able to launch this poll. Let me launch this poll really quick. Audience, if you can respond, and I just want to get a feel like what's our audience? Mostly students, our professionals out there, and so Steve can adjust your presentation. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close it. Assume if you can just respond really quick. Not really a thinking question. We just want to kind of get assessment. What's our volume make this morning? Okay. So it looks like most of the folks have some understanding of cybersecurity, and I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll now. So we have a lot of students, some cybersecurity professionals, and then one person's none above, looks like. So Steve, go ahead, let me.
Can we go ahead and share my screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Okay, can you see my cover slide?
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to address one question that just popped up, and the question is, how do we determine, based on the business, what is the right security approach? Let me see if I can pull up the chat while I'm sharing. Doesn't appear to be so. But so to answer the question, it really it is on the business that you have to where your security concerns could be. So if you happen to be in the shipping business, there's a lot of servers that are going to be reliant, or the business is going to be reliant on those servers. And those are ones that they're kind of the keys to the kingdom. And if you happen to be in a sales organization, it would be your sales database, your billing organization. If you're a hospital, it's your EMR, your PCI environment, and actually I'll give you some examples of compromises of these different examples here as we get going. But it really depends on the actual business and what they do is to what the keys of the kingdom are. So if you're an auto repair shop, it's not going to be as critical as it would be if you happen to be a large manufacturer or shipping organization.
And also, I think that one of the biggest challenge with that question is a lot of organization or individual don't know what risk they have going into, because the benefit is great, right? It's almost like the benefit, you have like 1 + 1 + 1 is not equal to 3. It's actually exponential. Just think about IoT devices out there. If we're a little bit more advanced on what IoT and IoT, think about like with the pandemic or contact tracing, that could be done much easier with the devices, smart devices out there. So those are potential benefit I can think of. But when you're facing those sort of lucrative payback on having smart devices, and it's, a lot of time people have tendency to overlook. But I think from Richard's point presentation, there's a lot of awareness right now, and in security vendor like Trend Micro, we have put out family of devices and solutions that address these things. And but I think the most biggest challenge from an industry standpoint is there's a lot of things we still don't know. We don't know we don't know right now, because there's vulnerability we get discovered all the time and at a different level.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, well, we'll get started. So my name is Steve Allison, and I am going to be covering the enterprise threat management piece of this, and it kind of ties everything that they've talked about earlier today. I mean, they've talked about some targeted attacks and how they happen. They've talked about IoT and infrastructure. So I'm going to try to wrap it all together and show you from a CISO point of view, what do we need to do? What do we need to look at to be able to protect these, right? So quick agenda here, and really it's focusing on the protection, detection, response, and then recovery, and where the best, where your money is going to be best spent. So you're not going to be spending extra money you don't need to. A quick introduction to me, I'm a cyber technology advisor for Trend. I've had 8 years of CISO experience, and I've done just about everything except for Windows desktop management, and then 10 years Air Force on search to air, air-to-air weapons, and then also cyber warfare. So everything we blamed other countries for, that's what my organization did. Okay, so getting into cybersecurity threat management, when we're looking at what a CISO has to look at, what is the technology day to day that they have to deal with and make work in some orchestration somehow, and get the people together to be able to see the big picture. This is a pretty good snippet of what they really need. And if any of these fail, if server security fails, the business can go down. If certificate management fails and you can't get to the website, or the website is no longer considered safe and people don't want to shop there because they're not getting the little lock on their window, that could stop them from shopping on your site. So with a lot of these, anything could make a business go down. So I just wanted to kind of throw that up as a quick snippet, and we'll come back to that later after I've explained it, and it will all make sense. Getting the most for your budget, right? Protection, for me, protection, we're going to go deep into protection and talk about the different levels of protection, the different kinds of protection in your organization, how they work together, what should work together, and then where it should all get reported in the end. Detection and response. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about EDR, endpoint detection and response, and how those work, in conjunction with the protection. And then the last thing that a lot of people don't talk about is recovery. So when protection fails, detection and response fails, you have recovery. And the recovery is actually, when you're looking at the dollars that are spent, protection is actually the cheapest. It can still, be anywhere from 6 to 10% of an overall IT budget. It's still the cheapest thing in the chain, whether detection and response or even recovery. And detection and response, when we're talking about a SOC, that's going to be your most expensive per square foot room in your entire data center and in your organization, just because of the technology that's in there and the people that are in there. So my formatting is not coming out right now, but anyway, putting the protection in the right place, the right technique at the right time. You know, you have two different frames of thought on this, and you know, a lot of people are like, well, we don't like signature. We don't want signature based. We want the latest and the greatest, you know, behavioral based. But the thing is behavior based anti-malware is actually takes up a lot of resources. You want to knock out the things that you know first. So when you're looking at signature based, these are the knowns and the unknowns, being able to knock those off first. The easiest part of the whole anti-malware piece is knocking out the known good, known bad, and then focusing on what you don't know about, right? So when it comes down to looking at, you know, pre-execution machine learning, that can be a little more memory intensive, CPU intensive. So you want to make sure you knock out, you don't want to be testing every file that comes in and out of a machine. You want to knock out all the knowns and unknowns first. You go to pre-execution machine learning, you can find out which some of those are good, some of those are bad. Then you go down to behavior analysis, runtime machine learning. And when we're talking about behaviors, is this file behaving like it's supposed to? Is it trying to do a memory, you know, install an application through a memory buffer overflow vulnerability? Is it using a PowerShell script to install something that it shouldn't be? You know, you want to be able to know that stuff, but it does take some resources. And again, trying to narrow it down to just the smallest piece that you're actually going to have to send to a sandbox for analysis. And there's a couple of different types of sandboxes. Some are just a virtual machine that you can run the malware on. And if it turns out to be malware, then you know it's bad and you can block it. However, a lot of malware is now sandbox aware and is VM aware. And so the other side of the coin is you can run what's called a bare metal sandbox, and you can set that up similar to your own organization, and it will run on what would be a bare metal. It seems like it is an actual real machine running, and you can get the malware to run on that. Okay, this next page here, the way I have this set up is everything above the line is your cloud, everything beneath is on-prem, and then all the way over on the far right is, you know, pretty much the internet, although along the middle is the internet going out to the cloud too. For me, the key to everything is the global intelligence. So when you have good intelligence, you have to have intelligence to tell your products what's good and what's bad. If you do not have a good intelligent background, your applications or your security software doesn't really have any teeth to it. The intelligence is the teeth to everything, and it has to be able to funnel all the way across the line. So when we're looking at the tech that I'd mentioned before that a CISO has to look at, you know, a proxy or web gateway, when we're looking at proxies, I can tell you when I was a CISO for DHL, we couldn't get funded for a proxy. I actually was able to get HR to fund our first proxy because we were doing, 2 to 3 porn investigations a day from guys surfing porn. And I told them, I said, if we can get a proxy and block that, we don't have to do these investigations anymore. And they loved that idea. So they actually funded my first proxy in the US. And then we were able to get some more after that. But the proxies and, the SaaS web protection has grown so much from just doing categorization blocking. Now they have anti-malware built into them. They've got reputation built into them for different URLs that are bad. So they've really grown up in a big way. And IDS, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems, CASBs and that's actually kind of going to the wayside and further new technology. But CASB, being able to know everybody in your infrastructure what cloud apps are going to and what they're actually doing, and if you can tie that together with a data loss prevention product or something else that can really monitor that web activity, it can be very powerful. SSL inspection, being able to break open packets if people are sending out emails with company confidential information and they're sending it, through Gmail, which is, SSL encrypted, you want to be able to break that open and make sure you can see that there's either no malware coming in or that they're not sending information out. Compliance. Compliance was talked about a little bit earlier, whether it's going to be NERC or, GPR, whatever your compliance is for your organization. However, a lot of people don't think about it for the cloud. And the cloud is a huge, they're like, okay, we're putting all our stuff in the cloud, so it's going to be secure, because they seem to think that, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they're all going to they secure their cloud, so we're not going to have to do anything with it. And that's not the case whatsoever. You still need to make sure that, if you've got storage that's out in the cloud, that you've got that protected, that it's not, it's not public facing. If your accounts, you need to make sure your accounts fall within line with your IAM policy. So the cloud GRC is a big thing, trying to get more people to understand that. And I think they are. And I've got some examples here as to why they're starting to understand that in a little bit. Cloud storage protection, you have people who are actually putting, from home, they'll put, stuff up into the cloud, could have a malware on it, and then they get to work and then they try to download it to the cloud. I mean, you need to have that kind of protection in there. Sandboxes we talked about, and I'm going to kind of run through these a little quicker because we have quite a bit to get through. Encryption, I think a lot of us understand encryption. There's so many different types, whether it's just full desktop drive encryption, email encryption, even encrypting files in the cloud. Just too many different types to go over. Data loss prevention, very important. I found that there's two types of data loss prevention customers. There are kinds that have they have to check a box in an audit, and they have some that are very, very big into every aspect of their organization, whether it's going to be, endpoint, email, web, CASB, in the cloud. Everything has to go through some kind of DLP, and those are usually hospitals are the big customers at that level. And then federal customers, whether they're federal, civilian, or Department of Defense, Department of Justice. Server security. So server security is a little bit different than normal endpoint security. And why? It's because they behave differently. You could just put regular anti-malware on a server and it will work, but servers don't need a firewall on there because you definitely don't want to be blocking any kind of traffic onto a server. But you want to be able to lock down certain aspects of applications to where they cannot be changed. And the same thing goes for workload protection. A quick story. I think back in 2007, I got called out to a parking lot because there was a guy sitting out there in our parking lot watching our building. So, our guards asked if I would go, approach him and find out what's going on. And when I got out there, he's actually an FBI agent friend of mine. And he was talking about, it was Citibank had sent some tapes to through UPS to Experian. And what ended up happening is the tapes are secured with, it has to be delivered to a specific address, and it's 2 signatures required. Somewhere along the way, somebody had gotten into the UPS system and changed the delivery to no signature required, and then changed the address. And so once the package was delivered, and they saw that it had been delivered, they changed the address back, uploaded 2 signatures, and then left it as if it had been delivered to Experian. And so when I asked him, I said, that's a really cool story. What does that have to do with me? And he said, the suspect that we believe committed this now works for you. And so it really kind of put opened our eyes as to our server security is, are we able to protect from that kind of attack? That is a true insider attack. The guy's getting a job inside company to do an attack. I was part of a red team, and my job was social engineering. And I actually with one job that we had, I wrote myself a job offer, showed up for new hire training, and started working as a Unix admin. And we was compromising all their systems from the inside, and they had no clue for 2 months. Nobody wanted to admit it that they didn't know who I was because it would have made them look bad. So they just put me in a desk, gave me a system, and for 2 months I did that. So inside security is a big deal. Endpoint protection. We talked, a little bit about that, with the funnel, but with that funnel, it also needs to apply to email security. It should apply to, web security, network security, server security. All that same type of funnel needs to apply across the board. Endpoint management. I'm a huge fan of endpoint management only because, and vulnerability management, because if you don't know what your endpoints are and what you own, you don't know what to protect, and you certainly don't know what shouldn't be on your network. So if you have something new that's an unmanaged device, if you don't know what you own, you won't know that that's an unmanaged device. And identity management, we talked a little bit about that, and knowing who's coming into your organization. On the back end of all of this, you're going to have storage. You're going to have all of the information coming back and being stored. It's either going to be on-prem, it'll be in the cloud. It has all your files, URLs, certificates, everything, and that's managed by the SOC. So the SOC is to see all of this information and do something with it, right? So when you're looking at, their detection and response aspect of things, they do have a SIM. Now the SIM is going to show them everything that, depending on how they want to set it up. So if there is malware, in a SOC, if a machine ends up getting malware and it's deleted, it's found, it's deleted, it's cleaned, we don't need to see that kind of stuff. We want to be able to see the stuff that, hey, it has malware, it was unable to be cleaned. Now let's go take a look at that. But you want to be able to get this information, again, from your endpoints, your servers, your network, IoT, cloud. All of these things are going to be feeding into that. And then with XDR, it's a little bit different than what I would say, your normal SIM would be, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. So with XDR, MDR, that's your center console. The intelligence is number one. It has to have a good intelligence feeding it. If it's MITRE attack, web reputation, tactical threat analysis, indicators of attack. So these are all things that need to feed into, your XDR, that has to have something to compare this to, and then we're looking at endpoints and email, servers, cloud, IoT, network, everything that I just mentioned. So obviously, you're going to want to have that communication between your XDR and all of these different entities. But just as important is you want to have the communication between all of the entities and your intelligence. So for example, if an endpoint finds out, detects some kind of malware activity, let's say that it's a PowerShell script that came in an email, wasn't picked up by anti-malware because it wasn't a virus. But when you clicked on it, it actually started doing some nefarious activity. It opened up a port to go outside. The guy who sent the email, he's now able to log into that machine. He's enumerating to see how many machines around him, going to try to use that account that he just got to get on these other machines. And from those machines, he kind of just spreads himself out a little bit more. Well, once that indicator of attack is found, again, it's not malware, it's an indicator of attack, that we just saw this kind of activity that indicates that there is some kind of an attack going on. You can go back, you want it to tell the intelligence, because you want the intelligence to go back and tell the email, hey, this PowerShell script came in through email, through this type of email. So now if we see any email with this attachment on it, we want to now block it and not let it get to any endpoints. Or if it happens to be on an endpoint, we want to pull it away from the endpoint, or tell the endpoints to now delete that file across your entire organization. So the intelligence is key to being able to talk across cross-platform, cross-network, and the XDR the same. I mentioned the SOC. At DHL, my final task at DHL was to build a follow-the-sun global SOC. So across Malaysia, Prague, and Scottsdale, Arizona. And so we had, they're saying that, typical 1,000 employee company has about 22,000 events per second. We had 200,000 employees at DHL. And a lot of them are drivers, so they're not really, driving a lot of events. But we do have a lot of employees and a lot of tech in the company. And so you have to find a way to where you can see that, because if you're trying to look at all of the events in XDR, it looks like this. And there's just no way to manage that. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to pick out the real events, real something that is not just a malware related, something that's going to show me, hey, here's an indicator of compromise, you know, reduce all that noise and say, you know, if you look at this one, it says, shows, you know, login from Corruption Daily, got into this machine probably through a PowerShell script. He was able to enumerate to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other machines and get onto those machines from this US IT 847. He's able to jump onto 4 servers. And from the information from those servers, he was able to, you can see that he's got a cross communication out to user corruptiondaily.com and web corruptiondaily.com. So, you know, from that one login, you can see all of the activity and what has actually happened. Now, being able to take immediate reaction, you know, you want to be able to right click on those entities and say, let's just say US cells, we know that means compromised. Right click on it and isolate it from the network. Boom, he's done, and probably USIT 847 if that's just the desktop. But being able to block the corruptiondaily.com domain so you can no longer send anything there. And even if somebody gets the PowerShell script and they double click on it, it will not be able to actually access those that site. So this is really kind of the focus of XDR, and this is where your SOC, you know, you start getting into more money because, you know, these are guys that are working constantly and they get paid well. They're experts. Now the recovery side, this is where it gets fun. So here's a few experiences that I've had in my career. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get back to this first. Recovery from backups. Have they been tested? I can't even tell you. Number one, backups are probably the most expensive software in the organization is backup software. And surprisingly enough, a lot of organizations don't test their backups as much as they should, or if ever. I have a hospital here in Phoenix that they had a finance system go down. They had never tested their backups, and their first backup was 5 years ago, and they've been taking incrementals every day since. And so for them to restore that, it would have been going back and getting the very first tape and then restoring all of the incrementals. But unfortunately, they didn't have the hardware to restore the first tapes. So they were out trying to find that hardware. It was an amazing loss for them because that was their finance system and it was their billing system. So people who owed them money, they had no idea who owed them any money anymore. And I don't think they actually ever recovered the entire system. The recovery of business, lost confidence. I'm going to get into a great example of that. Corporate image comes along with the lost confidence, but now your investors have no confidence in you. And lost revenue. This is where the big money is really spent. If you're not spending the right amount of money at the right place, this is where it's going to get you. Here's one with another company I work for. You know, we had an endpoint protection product for them, and they decided they wanted to save 80 grand a year and go with the free endpoint protection that was offered by their OS vendor. And it immediately started with 3 to 4 machines a day getting infected. But, you know, you think 3 to 4 machines out of 40,000, not that bad. It came out to about 1,000 a year. When we went back about a year later, talked to them about how they were doing. It's about 1,000 machines that they had to redo in the year. The company they had hired that was doing all of their endpoint management was Lockheed Martin, which is a very high-end integrator. And they charge, you know, $500 per machine to re-image. And it took about 3 hours of downtime to do that. So I asked them, I said, are you guys doing the math in your head like I am? I said, you had 1,000 machines at $500 a machine in 1 year. It's, you know, 500K plus 3,000 hours of lost productivity. I said, normal, you know, work year is 2,080 hours. And now you got a year and a half of lost productivity, you know, and on top of that. Since that's a hard cost. It's not a soft cost. It's not an estimate. That is a hard cost that they paid out to save, you know, on an 80 grand premium. Again, not wanting to put the right money in the right place. Transport and logistics. Yeah, I'll tell you, it was my company DHL. We built a $4 million sort center in Cincinnati, and this is where all the planes around the globe came in to the U.S. first and left the U.S. to go around the globe. So when they land, they'd be offloaded, packages scanned. They could scan thousands of packages per hour, and then they would load the planes back up and send them off. So it was just this constant revolving thing of planes going around. Well, the software vendor, when they built that, my only requirement really was that they had anti-malware on those servers. 3 days before go live, they came and showed me the risk and said I needed to sign off on it, but they didn't have any anti-malware, so I refused it. We went round and round. They said there was no way they could get infected because the firewalls only allow outbound transmission, no inbound transmission whatsoever going to the servers. I still wouldn't sign it. So my CIO ended up signing the risk acceptance on that. Vendor comes in a year later to update the software, and he does, and he also uploads SQL Slammer on every one of the machines. Data center goes down for 3 days. Now you're talking about guaranteed shipping. People send a package, it's guaranteed to be there in a certain time or your money back, right? So we're down for 3 days. It took us 3 weeks to recover to normal operation. Total damage is $72 million to just avoid putting anti-malware on 50 machines. So, and so those of you who used to see a lot of those, about 2008, you see all those yellow trucks and then they kind of died down. There's still a few of them going around, but that's all just overseas. They don't do U.S. domestic business anymore. Deutsche Post, who owns DHL, decided to pull out of the U.S. domestic market at that point because we lost confidence. We lost investor confidence in the U.S. So they pulled out. Last one is hospital. We had to fail, and this kind of ties back into what the question was, is how do you know what's important and what needs to be covered? So I'm trying to cover this with some examples here. Hospital fails on security assessment and is compromised. So I was doing a security assessment for a local hospital here, and it was based on a data loss prevention accident there. I'm going to call it an accident that they happened. They sent out a bunch of flyers to their customers that had their names, addresses, social security numbers, and their hospital identification code on the mailing label. And so, it was an accident, but they got fined heavily for it. And so they wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. So we came in and do a security assessment, DLP assessment. And we found out, it was so much that, no network segmentation, no, PCI issues. I could literally reach their PCI environment, their HR environment, their EMR, electronic medical records, from just plugging in my laptop into their network. And that should never be able to happen. Talked to the CISO and they said, yeah, they know it's on their 2 to 3 year plan. And I told them that this is a 2 to 3 month plan. This is not 2 to 3 years. You guys got it. This is something you need to get money, get it fixed now, because it is severe. A year later, they got compromised. So somebody went in through the PCI environment in the cafeteria and was able to get all the credit card information from all their vending machines, everything that happened inside the cafeteria, and all of the payment information that had been paid to the hospital from patients. Then they were able to get into the main data center, which they shouldn't have been able to, and got all of the hospital employee records. So pretty much everything. So, anything that you would put on an application, they had. We got into HR and got everything. And then they got into the EMR and stole, I think it was a little over 3 million medical records. So I think their total bill, to fix that stuff, if they could have done it in 6 months, would have been probably a little more than $1 million. But now it's well into the double-digit millions of the fines and lawsuits. OCRs fined them. These are things that you have to take seriously. And a lot of them seem to think it's not going to happen to me. We keep hearing that, have we ever seen this happen to anybody else? Well, yeah. What is this? Guest worldwide, millions of hotel guests. I wouldn't want to be the CISO of that guy, of that place, right? Worms in Microsoft Teams. Here's one. how Reich ransomware operators made 34 million from one victim. So a lot of people say, well, you got cyber security insurance, your cyber insurance. Well, yeah, but now cyber insurers are trying to find a way to write clauses in there that they're not going to pay ransomware. So it's like, well, that's one of the biggest things they need to pay for is ransomware. And, now when we're looking at the federal government, I mean, my last, before coming to Trend, I worked with the federal government, mostly on the civilian side, but also in the Department of Justice. But, these are the organizations that were compromised by the SolarWinds attack, chain attack. I mean, the Department of Treasury, Department of State, Homeland Security, Department of Energy. I mean, it's crazy. The amount of organizations that were compromised, and these are targeted attacks. And so these are the types of things that you need. It doesn't have to be. SolarWinds can have a vulnerability, but if you have the right strategy in place on your servers to protect your servers, you can prevent these attacks from happening, regardless of what SolarWinds is doing. So these are the things I'm trying to stress forward to say that when you get to looking at these kinds of things, to take them serious, to figure out, okay, if there is a vulnerability, how else do we block this? How do we fix this? Well, again, how do you block it? How do you fix it? It all comes back to a lot of these controls. These are controls that have to be in place. They have to be working together. They have to be configured properly. It's not a matter of install, and forget. They have to be configured right. So these are the things that, as a security engineer, you're going to end up dealing with one or more of these, usually at one time. And I am open for questions.
Okay, yeah, feel free to send in any questions or also raise your hand if I'm not sure that feature's working in Zoom here. And I can allow your questions to be presented, from the audio. Okay, Steve, some students are attendees still gather the questions. I have one question. It appears you have a lot of good experience in industry in cybersecurity. Since we got a big student audience out there today, how would you advise them to, there seems to me there's a lot of skill set you kind of have to keep up, right? And I think it's going to get even more complex is sort of emergence of IT, OT, and also the human factor that come into play. And there seem to be a lot of things to learn or keep up. What advice can you give to the students if they're thinking go into cybersecurity is a career option right now?
Well, I think for me, cybersecurity is great. If you've got, if you like to learn a lot all the time, if you have ADD, it's great because you're never going to get bored, and every day is a different challenge. But find an aspect of it that you really like, and first get into that. And from there on, I mean, it can be investigations. It could be working in a SOC. And I will say that the hardest part of working in building a SOC in the U.S. is staffing it, because people coming out of college, they don't want to sit there and stare at a screen for 9 hours, and that's the job. After 6 months, they want to go do something else. But find kind of your niche and then start building on it. I think certifications are great, but a lot of people they'll study for the test, they take the certification, and then they've kind of forgotten most of the stuff with that certification. So just kind of build on something you love to do and start spreading yourself out.
Hey, Mitchell, I also want to add to Steve's point, right? Right now, there is a shortage, right, of cybersecurity expertise out there, across all vertical, across the whole industry. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity, right, for, especially a student who, at least at this point in time, right, to kind of go after this particular skill set. And, I think, the opportunities are there. So we definitely have a lot of shorter skills. On the OT networks or in the industrial control side, we even have I think it's even more challenged, right? Because there's a lot of people there who really more of an engineering than cybersecurity expertise, right? So to Steve's point, right? There's so much opportunity out there right now, and I would really encourage it. I think for many of the students to go out there and really tackle this space, and this is a fantastic opportunity. I think for folks like Steve and myself, I mean, we've been around, for a long time. When we see this industry evolve, it's just such a, I would say, fantastic time for them, because there's never a boring day, right? I mean, especially when you deal with all the different adversary and the different technology that are coming out, on a daily basis. It's just, you can, I mean, you can go as far as you want.
Yeah, I think definitely for the students out there, there's also an organization from NIST, that they present as CyberSeek, SEEK, cyberseek.org. They have a job map where all the position that's available. I think the vacancy is somewhere north of 500,000 jobs or more available in the United States alone. And so there's lots of opportunity in the cybersecurity career. And I think the advice also I can give is, just like Steve mentioned earlier, that you got to find something you like to do, right? And hopefully not only you like to do, I'm sure like Steve and Richard, you probably don't have to pay them very much because they love the job so much, right? And because there's such a high level of passion, but also you do want to assess your skill, because some people are just naturally good with technical things, hands-on. Some people are good with math, some people with art. But I think cybersecurity for me is a sort of profession and industry sector that's really growing. Will be growing very fast. And so it's not limited to just people with technical side, but also for business, legal side. They need a lot of people writing data privacy laws and contracts and things like that. So I think if you're interested for students out there, this is certainly a worthwhile area to explore. And also the economic factors there. Usually the job is, you're not going to get rich to work in cybersecurity, like extremely wealthy, but it's a good paying job, and they usually, because there's a high demand for the talents out there. Okay, and I don't see any questions. I think Richard posted some link about IIoT, and I posted a link. We just did a cybersecurity summit with the support from several universities, including San Jose State and locally. And I posted a website because all the presentation is available on demand, including the CyberSeek organization. The head of that organization actually came give a speech on that, and there's a lot of other good presentation there. Feel free to browse through if you guys have time. Okay, any other last minute question, comment from Steve or Richard or Jerry? Okay, if not, I will go ahead and adjourn the session and give you guys a little bit more time for lunch. And thank you. And I want to also extend my thanks for Professor Park for the opportunity for us to be here this morning and help our community on overall cybersecurity education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Michelle.